This week, the world's most widely renowned press freedom organization, RSF, Reporters Without Frontiers, I'm not even trying to pronounce it in French, said we're at the lowest point in 25 years. Also, this month, one of the most longest running late night shows in history in American TV will be canceled, will end eventually for financial reasons. David Letterman called CBS, the network who said it, lying weasels. I think they're both right. Sawadee and welcome to another episode here for the Fun Report, Mindful Media and Communication from a new location, a little bit bare bones still, just moved. You can see only white behind me. That will change eventually. But for now, we had to get this podcast out. So, we just had World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd. You probably did not know that. Now you know. And RSF, Reporters Without Frontiers, releases their 2026 index, okay? And global press freedom is on its lowest point since 2001. That's a very long time, even though I don't want to admit that, because for me, everything after 2000 is just like, has just happened. But it's been 25 years, which is crazy, okay? We are also coming closer to the end of Stephen Colbert. The late Stephen Colbert has been announced to be cancelled. I'm calculating in my head right now, as you can see, I don't know, months ago, whatever. But I think May 21st is the last episode, so we're very close to that. The official statement by CBS was, let me read it, purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night. If you remember what happened the days before the cancellation announcement, though, Colbert on air criticized a settlement between Trump and Paramount, which is CBS's parent company, over a 60-minute story, right? And you might think that those two stories are separate, but they're not, and I will show you how they're not. This episode will tell you why they are not completely apart, so to speak. Let me start with the Colbert case. Then I'm going to go into the global picture and will also bring in the pattern that we can see in things like that, okay? So, when I start with the Colbert case, okay? So, The Late Show was number 1 which is very important apparently, for 9 seasons, right? It's not a struggling show. It didn't have a ratings problem as far as you would call it these days. Donald Trump disagrees. Paramount Global, CBS's parent, is currently seeking that approval for, and I have to write it down, $110 billion merger with Warner Bros. That approval goes through the Trump administration. 2 weeks before the cancellation was announced, Colbert devoted a whole segment criticizing the Trump Paramount thing. Yeah. And it was, again, over a 60 minutes interview with Kamala Harris that Trump was claiming was deceptively edited. Okay, cool. Doesn't really matter. It's pretty dodgy. So doesn't really matter in a sense of like the content doesn't really matter what Kamala said, what she didn't say. It's more like, it goes through the government. The government says, hey, if you want this to happen, you gotta scratch my back. David Letterman, who kind of built that Late Show franchise, right, called CBS, quote, lying weasels, and said it wasn't a financial decision. And no one believes it's a financial decision. If we look at some theories, because that's what we like to do here, right? If you look at the political economy of media, for example, and we look at, let's say, Chomsky, for example, since we're criticizing American late night shows, let's talk Chomsky, and let's talk the propaganda model. Herman also in there, of course, and they suggested that media isn't controlled by direct censorship, right? It's controlled by ownership, by advertising, by dependency, and the interests of the parent company. So The filter that's between a story and the audience is not a phone call that says like, kill the story now. Yeah, that's not how it happens. That's how it happens in movies, maybe, but in reality, it's more structural. And the chilling effect here is that you don't need to cancel one show to silence journalism. You just need other broadcasters to watch what happens when you do. And that's what's happening, right? And there's another theory. We talked about it many times here on the pod, the framing theory. And CBS tries to frame it. Yeah, they chose the word financial. That word that does like enormous work for them in this case, because it makes political pressure invisible, well, for people who believe them. So it makes a structural decision look very arithmetic. It's like they just looked at the numbers. So what else are they supposed to do? That's their job. When the number one show gets canceled, right? In the week where its host criticized the owner's regulatory partner, and the official reason is financial, the word financial is doing the censoring. And now let's take this, right? The Colbert case. And now we look into the global picture, and then we bring it together. So the global picture, RSF, Reporters Without Frontiers, Press Freedom Index released always on World Press Freedom Day, which was, I'm looking at the calendar, 3 days ago, okay? They survey 180 countries. And press freedom declined in 100 of them, out of 180. The number that should stop you, though, in 2002, and I wrote it down, 20% of the global population lived in countries with good press freedom. In 2026, that number is less than 1%. For the first time ever, over half of the world's countries rank as difficult or very serious for press freedom. For the first time ever. The sharpest decline, the legal indicator, journalism is being criminalized worldwide. Statistics again, in 60% of surveyed countries, the legal framework deteriorated between 2025 and 2026. Again, 60% of the countries, the framework deteriorated between 2025 and 2026. So within 1 year, it has gotten way worse in 60% of the countries. The bottom of the index, of course, Eritrea, North Korea, China, Iran, sure. Those are the obvious cases. Yeah, I'm broadcasting here from Thailand. I am not telling you where we are ranking because I'm not criticizing the country that I'm in. But direct state repression, journalists in prison. Okay, we get it, right? So of course they're at the bottom. But the more interesting cases, and I don't say that they don't matter. Of course, they're terrible. Man, I'm in Thailand, so right across the border in Myanmar, things are similarly bad. But for maybe more a global audience, the interesting cases are that democracies are also sliding down the list. The US fell 7 places. Dramatic pause until I reveal which place the US is on. The US is on the 64th place. The land of the free is on the 64th place when it comes to press freedom. Not because of jackboots, because of regulatory leverage, ownership consolidation, and financial decisions. And, you know, again, I'm just pulling out theories to explain what is happening, and I'm pulling out theories that we discussed many a times, just to show you, you know that. You know what's happening. And in this case, look at agenda setting theory. Press freedom isn't just about what journalists can say. It's about what questions get asked at all. For example, who is allowed to ask questions at White House press meetings? Who is even allowed to attend those meetings, for example? And when a broadcaster is in a regulatory relationship with a government, the questions that don't get asked are invisible. And that's the problem. That is also press freedom. So the RSF's own framing of the 2026 decline is the following, and I quote, "Economic pressure on independent media is now one of the primary mechanisms of press freedom erosion. Not just legal repression, not just this is not allowed. Economic pressure on independent media." The pattern the RSF is documenting globally is exactly the mechanism visible in the Colbert story at the micro level. Ownership structures create pressure that don't require explicit censorship. They don't require explicit orders because there are structural orders. I'm bringing you a pattern now, okay? Give you more examples, because this is not the first time this is happening. I'm from Europe, right? So look back to Europe. I don't even have to go back all the way to where I'm from Germany, because we all saw that back in the day, of course, obvious. But I can give you less obvious examples. Italy in the 90s. There's Silvio Berlusconi, very famous, biggest, largest private TV networks holder, runner, while also running for prime minister. And no formal censorship, just ownership, deciding what questions can be asked, what can be on the air, who can be on the air. His channels, of course, never attacked him. That's the model. The BBC's relationship with the UK government, it has always been managed through like what they called a charter renewal. The BBC knows its funding depends on government goodwill. Nobody calls the editor. They don't need to. Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, and the UK, if you remember that, the UK phone hacking scandal. I'm not sure if you remember. If not, look it up. The relationship between News International and successive UK governments was so intertwined. That's second language. Intertwined that politicians they admit that they were afraid to regulate the press because of what the press might do to them. It's like mutual leverage, not censorship. And so what all of these have in common is the mechanism. The mechanism is structural, not editorial. No memo says, don't criticize us. The structure says it all. And the structure speaks instead. And the structure speaks like loud and clear. The 20% to 1% collapse in good press freedom countries didn't happen because of authoritarian governments and because they got more aggressive. It happened because of the economic model. The economic model of independent journalism just collapsed, and ownership consolidated into the hands of people with other interests. And that is the same thing that happened to Colbert. That's this Paramount, CBS, the government, same thing that happened to the global press freedom. So we just saw World Press Freedom Day. And World Press Freedom gets, like many other causes, one day a year. The rest of the year, press freedom erodes in ways that are announced in press releases and described as financial decisions. And maybe, business strategies, regulatory filings, and so on. It does not look like censorship. It looks like accounting. That's why it's so easy to hide. The Colbert cancellation might be exactly what CBS says it is, a financial decision. But here's the thing about financial decisions in the media. They're never only financial. Every decision about what gets made, what gets canceled, what gets said, what doesn't, that's a decision about what reality really looks like. And when you control the finances, you control the reality. The RSF index just told us that 99% of the world's population lives somewhere where that control is tightening. Colbert losing his show is small. That number is not.